I think,
There we go.
you know what? I'm on my phone. I just couldn't do it on my laptop. Who knows why? Okay.
Well, you know, it's my first time doing it, so I've never gone live. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, why can't she join?
Yeah,
But then I was like, I should
me
be able to see
neither.
you.
But you can see and hear me now, so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time.
It has been a while, yes.
Yeah. So I met you, and those for you who are joining, this is behind the punchline. So we're going to go behind the joke a little bit, because my interest has always been with comedians is what goes into the joke.
Yeah.
You know, when we perform and for an audience, you know, the audience hears the joke in the punchline and then they kind of leave. But like, there's a lot that goes into that.
Oh, yeah.
And there's, you know, there's several different types of comedians. How would you, what kind of class do you put yourself in as a comedian? Like, are you a storyteller? Like, what do you do?
You know, that's a really good question. And I think probably I would probably do I do storytelling, and then also kind of a merge of comedy and academia, because that's my background.
Yeah.
So like literature, art, and how to make those things funny.
Right.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of background about yourself, like where you're coming from.
So I spent 25 years working in the visual art world. I was a visual artist and a curator and a gallery director. If there's a job in the visual art world, I have probably had it. And then in 2020, just before the COVID shutdown, I finished my PhD and I needed a break. And so after being in the art world for a long time, COVID kind of made everybody, I think, sit down and take stock of where they were at and what they maybe wanted to change in their life or what they needed more of in their life. Yeah. And I wanted to do something different.
And you chose
comedy. I did. So I thought to myself, you know, I've always loved comedy. I've always enjoyed watching comedians, and I wanted to learn how to do that. And I knew someone who was doing stand-up, and I asked her, how did you get into this? And she said she took a class.
Yeah.
And I had that moment as an academic where I was like, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a good thing because like a lot of people are not aware that you can take a class, that there is a
like me.
A stand-up comedy workshop. Like,
yep. And so she actually directed me towards the Manhattan Comedy School, and I signed up for Karen Bergren's women's comedy class 2 years ago. And it was an incredible experience. It was amazing.
Do you remember who was in the class with you? Because we everybody I know is from Karen's class. So that's like the one thing in common is like we're all from Karen's class. Do you remember anybody from that class 2 years ago?
Absolutely, because a lot of them are actually in your show tonight. So Tiffany Lee was in my very first class, and so was Bijou Kabeja, and Alyssa Katz was in that first class, and Kelly Fleming was in that first class. I don't know if Paolo Baricio, she was in that class. Let's see, who else was in that class?
I'm surprised like you even remember, because like, you know, I think I took my class 2 years ago and I don't know who was in the class. I don't remember. I think Alice was in my first class. I think I remember meeting Alice in my first class.
What's so funny about that is that these women are so amazing, and I didn't know what to expect going into it. I assumed it was going to be all people much younger than me and people who were like really cool, and I was going to be this like 47-year-old weirdo, and it was not that way at all. It was this incredible mix of people. There were more people in that class, but I distinctly remember this group of women because it was so supportive. Everyone was really funny and interested in the process and supportive of each other. And so many of those women I'm still doing shows with today and going out and supporting them today. And we're in touch on WhatsApp and, you know, part of this women's collective.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the great things about Karen's class is that it does form that community of people. So you went to your first class. Had you ever written comedy before that? Like before, like you thought about it? Like what did you write down? What did you come to class with?
uh, I had just, I kind of, my husband and I write all of my material together. He's also, and we love comedy. We've always watched, George Carlin and Lenny Bruce and Gilda Radner, and then also a lot of the newer people like Tig Notaro or Fortune Femster. And I just really wanted to find a way to bring the world that I already knew into comedy, because I didn't want to talk about my family. I didn't want to talk about my kids. I didn't want to make fun of people. You know this, and people who know my comedy are like, I'm not punch down. I don't want to do anything negative. I really wanted to find a way to take the things that I'm interested in and make them funny. And it was a very interesting experience. And Karen was great. She was so supportive. She was like, okay, you can do your weird academic humor and we'll find a way to be funny.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful class, and the women were incredible. And it turned out to be a process that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's so interesting because a lot of times people find stand-up comedy because like they did theater a long time or they got into the improv. But to like never think about it before and to just take the class is a very interesting thing, because stand-up is kind of it's pretty ballsy. It can be a very intimidating experience, and I've done improv, but there's something about stand-up that is so different than any other performance.
Yeah.
Did you perform in your first show for that first class?
I did. I think what's so interesting about the class is like I've done, hundreds of lectures all over the globe. I've spoken to small groups. I've spoken to full lecture halls. And so for me, I know there were a lot of people who take comedy to get over that fear of public speaking, to learn how to be more natural in front of an audience. So I didn't have that hurdle, which was good. But I definitely had the big hurdle, which was being funny. So I can get up in front of a group of people and just talk about something for hours, but to take that and try to have it be a performance was a very different experience. And I was in class with people like Tiffany Lee, who came from a theater background, and people who had been doing comedy before. Like I had literally seen Kelly Fleming and Paolo Barricio in one of the new talent shows, and then they were there in my class, and I was like, oh well, this is, there's no way I can live up to this. And they were so sweet and so encouraging. And the first graduation show was it was such a great experience. It was really fun, I have to say. I was really nervous, and I'm not normally nervous talking in front of people. But I was nervous because I wasn't talking. I was trying to make people laugh.
Yeah, you're trying to make people laugh.
Not, instruct people on.
Yeah.
The history of a Michelangelo painting is very different because they're not supposed to communicate with you during a lecture. And this is a real discussion between the audience, and their reaction fuels you or it kind of freaks you out. And I did actually forget something. My first time, I completely forgot what I was going to say, and I just was like, oh, well, I guess that PhD is not really working out for me. And everyone laughed, and they started clapping, and they were so sweet, and I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. We're going to be fine here. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Do you find the writing of the joke difficult? Is that a difficult process for you?
No one believes this when I tell them I'm actually a very bad writer. I did do a PhD. I have written a lot of stuff, but I struggle with. I'm very good at speaking. I actually asked my PhD advisor if I could just do a 6-hour lecture instead of writing anything. They didn't go for it. But I was like, the writing is difficult, I think, because it's very hard to take something that's funny that you experience, because when you write it down, it kind of loses the experiential part, and so it's hard to think of something that's funny and then put it in language and then memorize it and then and have it have that natural feeling to it. So I do find it difficult, but I'm also very lucky. I have a writing partner, and if I have a topic, you know, like I do a set based on Frankenstein and Moby Dick and these two books, and I said to, you know, my husband, who's my writing partner, I said, I really want to do something about these two books, and I want it to be like telling dick jokes, but it's not dick jokes because it's actually literature, or like feminist jokes, but it's through literature. So something that is like kind of the time, but it's not direct.
Yeah.
And so I will kind of think of something like that, and then I ask my husband to kind of flesh something out, and then we go back and forth, and like then I practice it, and then I go back and do it again. But I think writing is difficult for everybody.
Yeah, I find the writing process difficult because, you know, when you're talking about like your experiences, like when it happens, it's like it can be the funniest thing, but then like trying to recreate it and put it into like, and of course, you know, comedy has the structure, right? It's like there's a structure to a joke, and so sometimes like, you know, you do take out the funny. I've always kind of wondered because I've had people tell me that I was funnier in person than when they saw me like perform. And I wonder if it's because like when you're so structured, it takes it away.
I think also when you're sort of just in an experience naturally, you're not thinking about the stage or the microphone or the audience or where you are in your set. And I think that just comes from the practice of it.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would still be doing this 2 years later. Wanted to try something to kind of get out of the groove that I was in. And when I started doing it, I realized that there was this whole community of people that I wanted to keep in touch with and I wanted to support. And I found, you know, some people, you know, like the people at Laughing Buddha, Andy, you know, who does people who were oddly supportive of the kind of strange stuff that I was doing, and just that kind of little bit of support. It was like, okay, if I get up and I kind of forget what I'm doing, or if it's not that funny, it's okay. And like, but the experience of having something like, I'm not sure what set I did in the class that I was with you, but I have a set where I talked.
No, I remember it was the Beethoven.
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 Okay, yeah.
I remember that one.
Beethoven is a hit or miss. I did that set at Grizzly Pear a couple weeks ago, and people were just like, "What is she talking about?" They were so
because you were talking about literature, and so I mean, I guess that would be very difficult. And so yours is a very like you have to sort of do the joke in a way where everybody understands, because like you know some of us did not read you know Moby Dick or you know so that must be a challenge.
It is, and but I have had a couple of people who have been really nice and have said, you know, I wasn't sure where you were going with this because I hadn't read that book, and I was like, oh, she's going to lecture at me, and they ended up really enjoying it. So I try for that, like, it's something that I'm interested in, but I'm not like leaving anybody out in the audience. But I do one set where I talk about a funny thing that happened to me when I was giving a lecture, and I did this in Karen's class. I worked through it in Karen's class, and she was like, okay, the more you do it, unfortunately, the more it's like you're just kind of telling the story. She's like, you have to like feel the embarrassment of like what happened to you during that lecture. And like that's difficult. It's very difficult, especially the more you tell something, the more comfortable you get with it. And trying to really be in that moment when something has happened to make it funny. And I think that's where people who come from a performance background probably have a real leg up, because they know how to act like they're in that space again.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference, like when like from writing a joke to actually making it stand-up material. Yeah, because like there's more that you have to that goes into it than just like I'm gonna say the joke now. How did you find your voice as a comedian? Like what did you? Was it like easy to find? Are you still trying to find it, or?
You know, I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I was just talking about this with my writing partner the other day, that I think I spent the first couple years defining who I wanted to be as a comedian as, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, I really wanted to, I think there are a lot of, I should start over. I support women getting on stage with a voice regardless. I think it's great that there are so many women in comedy, but I definitely think that there is a lot of self-deprecation that goes along with women in comedy. I think women, for the most part, what I find is that they work harder, they write more, they come more prepared, but in doing that, they also then have to kind of be a little self-deprecating, because it's threatening that there's so many women doing this, and the women are really funny.
Yeah.
And I knew that I didn't want to do that particularly. Like I'm very careful with the line of like introducing myself as Dr. Heidi Eichmann. My very first set, I talk about, that I am a doctor like Dr. Jill Biden, and I talk about how I was so annoyed that people didn't want to call her doctor, and that, there were people who were saying, well, you can't call yourself a doctor unless you've delivered a baby. And so I say, I have delivered a baby, like right out of my vagina.
Right.
I think that I knew I wanted my voice to be self-deprecating, but I have a PhD. I worked really hard to get where I am, and there are a lot of smart women out there. And I wanted to start there with something that is a foundation of like, I might make fun of myself, but I also know everything that I've accomplished in my life, and I'm really proud of it. And like, I want other women to get up there and be proud of the things that they've done and that they've accomplished, and walk that line of like, I can make fun of me, but you shouldn't. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think self-deprecation is like a big thing in comedy. And I think in Karen's class, like she kind of tries to steer you away from that.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like it can be very funny, but I feel like it can be very detrimental.
Yeah.
I don't know if people like realize like, that's like you've really dealt with these problems, but like if you are saying something over and over about yourself, it can really take a toll, which is not supposed to be what comedy is.
Right.
You shouldn't be in pain at the expense. Yeah.
So I think what I'm kind of doing this next year is like, I'm actually trying to figure that out now. Is like, who do I actually want to be kind of with intent, as opposed to just, oh, I don't want to. There are a lot of women my age who talk about their family and their kids and their husbands, and like, I don't really want to do that. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out more the voice that I want to have that's sort of more intentional, as opposed to like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be telling jokes like Nikki Glaser, because Nikki Glaser tells those jokes. Like we don't need another, menopausal 50-year-old woman in my age group talking about these things like that are already being talked about. And so I am not sure what my voice is going to be moving forward. I just know that I want it to be positive more than anything else. I don't want anyone to like go away, from this hearing another person kind of downing themselves. And I want to support other women who are really intelligent and really smart and want to go up there and talk about smart things in a funny way. There's a lot of us out there, and I think that it's hard to get those spots. And so anytime you get a spot on stage, I think it's important to.
Well, that leads us into the, is how difficult is it to perform in New York? We're both in New York now. Moving to New York, honestly, this is like the first time I got into stand-up comedy. I dabbled with it like a little bit, but like I honestly thought like this is not for me. Like, I mean, I did horrible the first 2 times. Like when I was living in San Francisco, it went terrible, and I was like, this is not for me. And so when I got to New York, I decided to try it again, but I was not aware of everything. So how hard is it to be a comedian in New York?
Well, I think that also depends on what you're doing with comedy. I think if someone is in their 20s and they want to be a comedian and they're like doing the hustle, I think it's like any other creative field. It's hard. It's it's not going to pay you a lot, and you've got to be doing it a lot. I've kind of already done my hustle. And so I'm not really in that position. So it's kind of a little bit different. And I want to make sure that that's like very clear, because a lot of people have asked me that question. And I'm like, well, I'm doing something where having one show a week or one mic a week is plenty. And it makes me very, I think it's difficult to kind of set a goal and then go for it. I think a lot of times people will be like, well, I want to be a comedian, and so I need to be at the comic strip. I need to be at this place. And like, I think that I would probably tell people the things that I tell artists who are starting out is like, you need to go to the clubs and find a club that like fits your style. You know, you need to go and find an open mic that's supportive. Like going to so many people go to open mics and they're like, it's soul crushing. I'm like, then don't go there. Go somewhere else.
And it's unfortunately, it's kind of like you just have to go through them all to find them, because you'd have no idea when you sign up which one's which.
And I think that there are a lot of comedians. There are a lot of good ones. There are also a lot that I'm not that interested in. And I think that if you really want to be a comedian and that's what you want to do, I think that you can do it. I think that you have to follow the rules. I tell all young artists, show up on time. Yeah. Don't complain about the spot you have in the lineup. Don't complain about paying $25 for your tape. Like the main reason that I feel like I have gotten a lot of the spots that I've gotten is I am just respectful of the people who put on the shows. Because it's really difficult. It's hard to produce a show, as you know, and it's hard to run a mic. And I think that the more that you kind of work on respecting everyone in the field, then the more likely you are to get asked back. It sounds really silly. It works for me.
Yeah, I know it definitely does. It can make or break, right? If you're the easier person to work with, if you get off the stage at 5 minutes, you know,
don't run the mic. You know, and then when other comedians are on stage, if you're in the audience, laugh. You know, like just those kinds of things will kind of at least get a foot in the door compared to someone who is not doing those things. But you know, I think you have to have a lot of friends to make it in comedy. Yeah. Because you got to be able to bring people. And
that's the harder part, I think, is, and that was something I was not aware of, was bringer shows. And being able to bring like 8 or 10 people to get stage time is exhausting, or like really difficult to do. And trying to build that network is like, I think it's hard.
It is. It really is. And it's very different coming from the art world, where like art exhibitions are free. I mean, it was a very big difference. All of a sudden being like, oh, everyone who comes to see me has to pay a ticket and has to buy a drink. And like, that's hard. It's hard to ask your friends to keep doing that and keep seeing the same set over and over again. Yeah. And so I think that building that network for younger people, like building a network of people to come and see you, by also going and seeing other people. You can't just be like, come to my show, and like never go out and see someone else's show. And that kind of support, I think, is what's amazing about this group of women, is that, I mean, I had never had an experience. Like I did one show at the Stand last summer, and I didn't expect, I thought I'll get my 3 people. And then it turned out like I came out and the entire front row, like the whole front row at the Stand, and it was like Tiffany, Alice, Melissa, Alyssa, Johnny, Becca, they were all in it was like amazing. I've never had like that before. And I really appreciated the support that they gave me to do that. And I think that building that network really helps people move forward in comedy, because if you're just always out there and there aren't those people in the audience that you know and they love you and they're there to support you, I can see it being very lonely. And
I mean, it is kind of already a lonely thing. Like you're by yourself typically. But yeah, having that network is really important, just to have that support. And sometimes like those are the only people who are coming.
Oh yeah. Let's go to our friend list. Not
Yeah, it's like the
people are not
email
like,
list.
you know, it's like outside of comedy. I mean, I also got into this to move away from the community that I was already in. I needed a change. And so having people, you know, who were like, oh, you know, I'll give you a spot in my show if you bring 10 people. I was like, can't do that.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of decide, you know, how much of that you can do. And I would say the biggest thing is don't accept a spot in a lineup unless you know you have the people. I mean, I see so many times I go to shows and someone is there saying, oh, well, they're coming, or, oh, you know, they're not, I can't get the people. And I'm like, that's hard on you, and it's hard on the person producing the show.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, so that's one thing that has worked well for me, is that I have had people say, hey, do you want to be in my show? And I'm like, sure, you know, when is it? When's the bringer? And I just say right up front, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe another time. And I've actually had a lot of those people come back and ask me again because I was upfront and I didn't say yes and then didn't show up, or say yes and then the day of say, oh, I don't have the people. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of shows that you don't want to be in, and it's okay to like do a show and then be like, you know what, I'm not going to do that show again.
Yeah, it's like, this was not for me.
Yeah. I've done shows where people have been like, oh, that was so great, you know, do you want to be in another show? And I'm like, you know what, thank you so much. Yeah. And like, oh, thank you.
Yeah. I feel like that's the soul crushing part, because Andy will send out an email saying, I have this bringer show, I just need you to bring 8 people, and you're just like, because it's not only like, you know, I think that people think, well, 8 people is not a lot of people, but it's not just like, well, here's 8 people, they said they were going to come. Like, you have to like, are you coming? Like, did you buy a ticket? Because if they are not only buy the ticket, but they have to show up. Yeah. That is like a rule. It's like, you know, you can't just buy 8 tickets and then like nobody checks in for you. Yeah. So it's a hounding thing that I'm not good at. Like, I just get them all like, oh, are you coming? Like, I'm like, oh, please. And so you have to like.
That's really tough. The bringer part is hard for everybody. And I think, you know, I spent like a year doing a lot of bringers. And a lot for me was like once or twice a week. You know, I was trying to do like a class one day and then a show another day. And then after, you know, 8 months or so, or a year, I was like, I really need to like back off on this, because it was just so stressful to try to always have those people. And then feeling like it really wasn't doing anything for me. You know, because then I was also just reevaluating. I was like, well, I'm not like trying to be a stand-up comedian and like get a Netflix special. Like, I just want to keep doing the comedy on a regular basis, and like finding the places where you feel good when you're on stage. And I love Andy. I love doing his shows. I just don't have the people to bring. Yeah. I love, you know, Jeff Lawrence and Laughing Buddha. Like, they've been amazingly supportive. You know, they're just like, oh, Heidi's going to do her weird Moby Dick set, or like Heidi's here to do her weird Beethoven set. And they're never like giving me unsolicited advice or anything like that. They're just nice people. And so finding a place where like you're happy, you like performing with, I think that's, if you can find that, you're really lucky. And I've been really lucky to find some places that I really enjoy performing. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to invest. And not typically it's like, you know, you have to take the class and sort of invest into that to kind of feel your way and build those connections. Have you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, like, do you ever fear like maybe losing yourself? Like, I mean, do you ever see a comedian where like they do a certain set and maybe it's not getting enough traction, and then they begin to change how they are as a comedian? Do you ever feel that, like, fear that? Do you feel like, is it easy to be like, well, I have to change myself in order to get?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I do see that. I think it's really easy to get kind of caught up in that person's getting more laughs than I am. I should
copy that.
I'm going to try to do that.
Yeah.
And Um, I think that's, I guess it probably isn't something I would worry about, only because I'm coming from another creative field where, having worked in the art world, seeing someone else getting more exhibitions than me, I wouldn't then think, well, I'm going to start making work like that, because it's not me.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, I think there are ways to kind of follow the trends while still being yourself. But I can see that being really difficult. I definitely have thought, oh, maybe I should do some jokes like this or that. And then I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right. And I did take the class at West Side with Clayton Fletcher, and he made a really good point that, like, the audience knows. They'll know if it's not you. They can feel it.
Yeah.
And I think he's right about that, is that if you're up there and you're just trying to do something that, you know, other people think is funny, but it doesn't really feel like you, it feels like a performance. And then people aren't going to be with you. You can be totally, like, I mean, the people at the Grizzly Pear did not really get what I was doing, but I also think that they were like, yeah, but she's being her.
Yeah.
And so maybe they didn't laugh as much. But if I had tried to do something that fit that audience, but it wasn't me, maybe they would have laughed, maybe they wouldn't have. But I think we all would have known that it wasn't really genuine.
I think there's a danger in that as well.
Yeah.
Because to play to an audience each time is, I feel like it's almost impossible, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, because comedy is so subjective. It's like, you know, you have to find your group. Or your audience, and if you're very, like, you know, specific and have a very specific style, that just takes longer, you know. But I'm excited for you to be in the show tonight.
I am so
nerves.
I'm hoping that everyone who is watching is going to come out to see Just a Bit Comedy tonight. It's going to be a great show. The lineup is amazing. A lot of the incredible women that we've talked about are going to be there, and I'm really excited. I'm so excited to get to see you again, and this was really fun. I love talking about the experience of comedy, because it's been so positive in a way I honestly was not expecting.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to me. Like, I enjoy the people's stories, and, like, you know, especially when you're in a workshop, like, I hear the stories of what's going into it. Yeah. You know, it's so much. And, like, you know, I mean, I'm a storyteller, comedian, you know, and I talk about my experiences and stuff like that, but, you know, there's so much behind it. And, like, you know, why do you choose the certain joke that you choose? Yeah. You know, like, what about Moby Dick, you know, inspired you, you know, to be like, I need to, like, write something funny about this, you know?
I was just like, I honestly, there's a real kind of sarcastic side of me where I was seeing so many, I'm sure you've heard, like, a lot of us women, we call them the dude bro comics, you know, the dude bros getting up there and, like, telling these, you know, dick jokes, and they were so bad, and it was the same joke over and over, and I was like, well, how can I talk about sperm and semen and say the word dick and not be telling those jokes? Right. And so it was like a dive where I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And I was like, well, I could talk about, like, there's Moby Dick, because I'd wanted to do something about Moby Dick just because the title is funny, and then, like, the story is so odd, and so that just kind of spawned the concept of, like, how can I talk about something and not be talking about it? Well,
see, that, you know, and that's the thing, and, you know, no, I'm not, like, discriminating against the guy comics. I haven't really worked with a lot of guy comics. I know a couple, and, like, the couple that I know are really great, but the women comics, I mean, it's just, like, even the lineup tonight, like, everybody is so different. Yeah. And it's just, there's so much creativity in, like, how they're telling me this joke and the story that they involve. Yeah. And I think that's, like, one of the best thing about watching women comics, because it's not like tonight, like, there will be no repeated joke. Absolutely. Like, you will not hear the same joke repeated. Like, it's completely different, completely different styles. Yeah. And it's just so creative. Like, I think the women really take the time to try to, you know, get rid of that surface, like, one-liner joke. And I think that's what's great about the women in comedy. And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of, like, you know, but I think it's going to be so great. Like, it's such a great show. So I hope people come out to it. You are #1 on the list.
love going first.
So thank you for volunteering.
Anytime. I have no problem going first. And I think it comes from that sort of lecture background of like, just get up there and like give the lecture. Yeah. I know it's hard. People need someone to break the ice, and I'm not sure if I'm the best person for it, but I don't mind.
You'll be great. I have to have the warm up, you know, I got to kind of like warm up into it and like give myself time to like go to it. But thank you so much for like doing this with me. I'm so excited to see you tonight, and
looking forward to it. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Great. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thanks to everybody who's listening. I hope you enjoyed it. All right. I'll see you in just a few hours.
Oh my gosh. I know. Oh, it's crazy. All right, I'll see you later.
See you soon.
Bye.